Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast. Today, joining us will be actually a friend of mine and someone I've known for a couple of years. You all know him as Michael RinoRemover. I guess CEO or founder of Capitalism is Freedom.com. Michael, welcome to our podcast show.
Thanks. It's an honor to be on.
All right, great. First, I want to get into it's basically, I actually found you, in 2009, and I actually seen you grow drastically. I remember it was like by the days you were getting thousands, like 1,000 more followers. What inspired you to start your Facebook fan page?
Well, I was going through my own political journey over the last few years. I was actually in college when September 11th happened, and it really, really affected me, being a New Yorker and all. And I then started really paying very close attention to what was going on politically. I felt I had no choice. And I wanted to support Bush, but there were so many things that just didn't make sense. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And then I got involved in commercial real estate as soon as college was over, and I looked around and I saw the way people were living. The whole second term, Bush's second term especially, to me reminded me of the moment before the last days of Rome, where you went from a city of conventional brick to marble, and I just saw people spending and living in ways that I knew darn well they didn't have the ability to. The way I was raised is that you spend money if you have it represented in the bank. So for every amount that you have that you're spending, there should be a big pile of it, converse to it, sitting in the bank. And here I saw people just living off of credit. It didn't make sense. And I knew that the piper had to be paid. I would walk around my mall, and I would think to myself, well, where do the regular people shop if everyone's acting rich? It was really mind-blowing to me. And I knew something was going wrong. I knew about the Glass-Steagall Act that was passed before Bush even got into office, and that was under Clinton. What I saw was both sides kind of working the system, and then Obama got in, and to me it was inevitable. But I didn't have the same ire that people felt for Obama as I did for what the Republican Party did by not being an opposition party, not wanting to, hold back on this expansion of government and this expansion, this crazy expansion of credit and whatnot. So, like I said, I had a lot of questions, and then I read Atlas Shrugged, and it just blew my mind. And I thought to myself, well, is there a fan page for capitalism on Facebook? And I did a cursory search, and I didn't see anything at the moment. So I was like, hey, let me try this out, and I did. And we started to go pretty fast, and the one drawback was when I was glancing through, and I noticed, we'd hit 500 in 1 week, it seemed. And I look over, there was another page, and where I had hit 500, that person was already at 1,500, but they had one post. You could still find it to this day. It says capitalism, and it just says better dead than red. And the sad truth is that the harder I worked to try to get past this guy, the more popular he became, because people were so excited about my page that they just wanted to be a member of another page that was, also big. Just for the sake, because it's all about numbers, you know what I mean? Uh-huh. And it took like a year and change. I had to. The one turning point was when I was able to grab "Kill the Bill," and I don't know if you remember this, but "Kill the Bill" was a very popular chant during the whole healthcare debate. And I looked around to see if anyone had grabbed that, and I saw one fellow named Caleb Scanson, some really amiable chap from the Midwest who had just complimented me about my capitalism page the week before. I saw his name all over it, and he had 8 friends on it. And I said, hey, Caleb, is this your page? I shot him a message. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, you want to be an admin? And I got to tell you, but before he even said that to me, when I saw his name all over it, I was like, before I realized it was his, I was like, if I wanted to, I could just, make my own page. But as soon as he made me an admin, I wrote back to him. I wrote, good move on your part. And at the time, I had a special trigger, and Facebook made it very easy for me that I was able to use both my profiles with about 8,500 friends, and I was able to invite all of them at once. And we grabbed 22,000 people in 5 days. And that was a turning point for my capitalism page because I was then able to advertise the capitalism page. Yes, it was depressing to be at 7,000 on that page and on my capitalism page, but I was at least able to get it to 10,000, and then from there really start to ramp up just the movement towards the page.
Ah, cool. And that page actually turned into a website, too.
Yes, it did. And I do have to admit, it is a process because I kind of threw myself into this whole political activism thing, but without knowing anything about it or how to get things done, or more importantly, how to get a website done. And we've gone through a lot of incarnations of the website. As far as I'm concerned, it's still a work in progress. So if any of your listeners are listening, we're still looking for good web developers. If you want to make a name for yourself and get touted to our almost 80,000 fans, we would appreciate all the help we can get. But our website, even as this work in progress, is actually we're even beating out some of the more prominent pundits like Ann Coulter and people like that. Not that I'm trying to compete with her per se, but we're able to get in some pretty good numbers because of the power of this Facebook page.
Yeah, that's true. And it seems like the Internet's like a big game changer with the information, because now the little guy finally has a say. You don't need to be some big corporate giant and have a TV station. You can sign up your own little blog and just write about what you think. And a lot of people do you see this? They're craving independent news. They're sick of a mouthpiece for one party or another.
Oh, absolutely. And that, I believe, is really what drives our popularity. And the funny thing is, it really is a game changer, just like you said. I always think of that quote from Andy Warhol, and he died many years ago, but he'd said that in the future he predicted that everyone would get their 15 minutes of fame. And you know what? It's there if you want it. And it's pretty darn amazing. So for any of you people who haven't started a page out there, if you have a niche that you want to develop, I highly recommend fan pages. But again, if there were a secret to this, I would say, like I said, find a niche and post a lot. I know some people will get turned off, and that's something that had slowed me down originally, because some people would be like, oh, you post so much. But the trick about Facebook is that the more you post, the more viral you go. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's true, and you never know who you meet. If you didn't start up a page and I didn't write as a hobby, we wouldn't know each other. I sent one of my papers that I got published at Edmund Burke Institute to you, and it was shared, and that's how we met. And so,
isn't it amazing though? And so many of my dearest friends have. I know it sounds weird, but I've come from the internet.
Yeah, it's really a game changer. But one other thing is you were talking about is I'm looking at the real estate market, and a lot of people are saying it's recovered. It's recovered. I personally see a reinflating bubble. I don't know if it will be as big of a bust as the housing bubble. I think the next major bust is the Treasury bond market. But you worked in real estate for a while. You said beforehand you're not as involved in it. What do you see? You're in New York. That's a big real estate area.
Of course, and the ironic part is that I became a broker in the summer of 2008, and I saw the writing on the wall. I really did. My parents were not thrilled about me even going into this business in general. Like I said, I sell commercial real estate, which is something maybe your audience may not be too familiar with, or maybe they are. I'm sure they're very intelligent for the most part. But commercial real estate involves income investment properties and development properties. That's what I specialize in mainly. It was development properties. So you take a look at a piece of land or a building that's already there, and you say, what can we do with this? What can we make of this? And it's really selling dreams. It's a beautiful, beautiful concept. But my buyers were nervous as hell, and that was a long. We're talking about 2006 through to 2008, because I actually was one of the younger people in the state to get my broker's license, and so in that short span of time, of doing deals, I could never get anything done outside of Manhattan, and whether you're from New York or not, I think it's been in the news that Brooklyn and Queens have been built up significantly, and they have. But my buyers seem to be very cautious. These are very rich people, and they don't have to spend their money if they don't want to. And if the risk is there, it's too high, they're not going to go there. And I then had to go through this process of reckoning what is causing the risk. And governments seem to be the enemy at every turn. And I want, in my heart of hearts, I would love to just drop this whole political activism thing and just go back to my job, which I loved so much, my own company, of course. But I can't in good conscience sell people a future that I can't really guarantee. Look, again, nobody can control the future, mind you, but the future is far more uncertain with every passing year. Every time we just keep printing more money, darn well it's not going to end well. The one thing that we have, at least in New York, is the fact that people want to move here. But then again, we're going to be having another mayoral race, and we don't know what type of mayor is going to come through next time. I'll tell you this much, Bloomberg, love him or hate him, I tend to dislike him very much for the most part with his nanny state. He did create a favorable business climate. He also upzoned a lot of Brooklyn and Queens, doing the same things that the Giuliani administration had done. And Giuliani was an unabashed Republican, and so it was hard to believe that someone like that could be voted in twice in the city. But like I said, after Bloomberg's administration is over, they're just itching to bring in a leftist, and I'm telling you, all this beautiful real estate could turn to garbage with just a few really bad decisions made by these people. And I remember what the city was like in the bad old days. It wasn't nice. And these same neighborhoods that are gentrified can turn to something not so good in the near future, especially when you're dealing with a lot of the public housing that's everywhere.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And D.C. is sort of gentrifying too. It's sort of in D.C. One thing is here, you wouldn't know there's much of a recession if you just came and visited D.C. I'm serious.
I read the headlines. Again, New York is in a shaky place, yes. D.C. not so much, because as long as government's going to keep growing at the rate that it is, what better place than to be than in the heart of the capital.
Oh, and you wouldn't believe it. All the big lobbyists are getting their nice apartments right by K Street. I'm not going to lie, though. I do like the one good thing about it, living in D.C., some of the restaurants around there are pretty good. I will say
they're
this.
improving. Hey, I'll tell you this much. I'm coming down this weekend. Can't wait to go to Gazooza's. I think that's a great joint. And I'm going to have to go a little bit further out to Falls Church. Is it Falls Church, right? Do I have that name right?
Falls Church is in the D.C. area. Oh, yeah, they go to Northern Virginia. Actually, Virginia has a really favorable business climate. So they got, the benefit of, the government leeches sucking money from America, but they also have a favorable business climate. So some businesses are moving there. So Northern Virginia is actually doing pretty well.
Oh, yeah. And on top of that, they have an original pancake house, which is phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, those are great. So,
it's my favorite place. I always go there when I'm in D.C.
Oh, cool. And one other thing is, speaking of what you said about leftists destroying things, in the state I'm in, state of Maryland, they pass a millionaire's tax. They treat capital very harshly, and a lot of people from Maryland are moving to Virginia just to escape taxes.
But the sad fact is that it's the rich people that are moving because they can move. The rest of us plebes out there, we have nowhere to go. Like I live in New York especially, and it's a hideous climate for everyone, for rich people and people like me. But at the same time, the rich people, just like you said, they can move. But people like me, where do we go? Granted, I suppose I could move to Florida. It might not be so hard. I might have family down there, but I don't necessarily want to leave either. But even more so, for the most part, it's very hard to move. It really honestly is. And to have government just come to pieces around you and take your life down with you and take your life savings down with you is just an abomination.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, the funny thing is, you're right, because a lot of people in my office, we hate looking at our paycheck because of the state income tax. And one of the themes are when we get our paycheck is we all go, boo Uncle Sam.
Oh, my God. And you're being kind. I'm sure you use more colorful language that we can't use on this podcast.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is true. So, but we're also in a work setting, so it's, it's in between, at home and on this podcast, so I guess. But speaking of just really bad things, I was watching the State of the Union, and all I have to say is when I was seeing it, I was like, we're screwed. This is the first time he's bragging about using executive orders. Like, how? I was thinking, is this America? Like, I know things are getting bad, but, like, when you see it, manifest, it's still surprising. What was your thoughts hearing about our president bragging about executive orders and how he's going to use them?
I mean, none of this is a surprise, and again, I don't. It's all a comedy in so many ways. So many horrific things have been passed already under his administration, and they just come and go, and you wait for the next thing, and. I'll be honest with you, on this journey of understanding capitalism, even just like I don't have, Obama doesn't bother me as a person, well, necessarily. I mean, I'm sure I wouldn't like him in person, but socialism doesn't even bother me as much as just the general concept of government. I had to reevaluate just what the Revolutionary War meant. I had just read 1776 a few years ago by David McCullough, and you see what people were sacrificing their lives for. They really wanted us to have these freedoms. And then you look at American history, and just from day one, from the passing of the Constitution, our rights started to get restricted right away. And it's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. I suppose our government or our loss of rights is growing almost at the same rate as Moore's Law. The one thing is that at least we have technology on our side with Moore's Law, and the internet's going a little bit faster. But that's the only balance that we have. And getting involved in learning about capitalism, and especially learning about Austrian economics, it changed my perspective and actually made me a more positive person. And it convinced me to turn off the TV when I hear someone like Obama speak. Because again, I knew he was going to win the election. The Republicans are not here to help us. They're not here to help us at all. They just play the good cop. Oh, don't you do that? Don't you do that? Well, what are you going to do? They won. They never tried. They shot down the one candidate that I actually felt anything for, and that was Ron Paul. So they don't want change. The Democrats don't want change. And now we have change, but their kind of change, the large government kind of change. And like I said, Austrian economics for me is like taking a chill pill. You read that and you say, you know what, they've seen everything, it's happened before, there's nothing new under the sun, there's nothing that's happening right now that hasn't happened in ancient Rome. And Rome started out as a republic very similar to ours, but it also degenerated because that's the nature of government. And I know I'm going to freak your listeners out, or some of them out at least, but it's because of that I became an anarchist. And all I'm going to do is sit and wait and watch it implode and hope to God that it doesn't lead to chaos, but instead to a better way of being, a world where it's all about voluntary human interactions. You know, I wouldn't be on this phone if you didn't ask me to, and I didn't think it was to my benefit to do this. I wouldn't make a transaction unless it was my benefit, and the person on the other side I would hope would be the same way. And coming from a real estate background, a deal isn't done unless all parties are satisfied. And it goes to show you that we can have a strong moral civilization just based on those principles. You know, where fraud is the only thing that we go after people for.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And not only that, it's just no one. The ironic thing is, Ayn Rand talks about selfishness being a virtue, but if everyone acts in their self-interest, you would be forced to make, even if intentions weren't quote-unquote good, you'd be forced to make a good deal with somebody because you have to benefit them and to please their own selfishness.
But you know, I see exactly what you're getting at. You know, it's in your best interest. You know, and that's what's great about capitalism and the virtue of selfishness. It's in your best interest to make a deal good for others. It's in your best interest to be a good business owner because there's this thing where people come back to you. They say, "Oh my God, nobody sells me coffee like John does, and I'm going to go to him until he doesn't serve me a good cup of coffee, you know, or until competition comes by and says, you know, and comes up with something better." You know, people are like, "Oh, you know, if the free market were to take over, you'd have nothing but monopolies." And all I can say is that's bogus. It's the big businesses that move to K Street as soon as they're big enough, pay off the government, and create regulations to prevent smaller companies from coming and competing. You would never have a Rockefeller or a Vanderbilt or a Bill Gates if you had unadulterated capitalism where people could compete constantly. You know, you could be big dog for as long as you're able to be nimble. But at the moment that you're not nimble, you'll be taken over by competition. Or moreover, you'll be overtaken by them. And that's what makes it a beautiful society. Nature has cycles, you know. Some animals are on top, for some amount of time, and then they're not. You know, climate change is shit, climate change. You know what I mean? It's been going on long before Al Gore ever switched to that word after global warming, went away.
Speaking of Al Gore, the most ironic thing is he wrote a book, Attack on Logic. And I was like, well, if it was his attack on logic, it would make sense. But unfortunately, that wasn't the premise of the book. So
certainly not.
Yeah.
It never is, because it's all about manipulation, and it's all about using government to harm other people and to force other people to live in ways that they shouldn't. And one other point that I really had to make, another reason that got me very involved in politics, is the fact that I'm Jewish, and I know the consequences of National Socialism. I know what it leads to. And I just found out that my own great-great-grandparents were killed by the Einsatzgruppen. And when I say killed, you think, they stormed in their house and shot them, but that's not how it worked. It was so much creepier than that. They were disarmed and weren't allowed to own guns. And then came this Einsatzgruppen, which was mostly made up of volunteers, a lot of people who were like school teachers and whatnot, and police officers. And they would come and knock on your door and drag you out of your own home, bring you to a field, give you a shovel, tell you to shovel a big hole, get undressed, face the hole, and wait for a gun to your head. And I think to myself, I am so obsessed with being free. How could somebody who shares my bloodline, how could they make these conscious decisions? How could they not fight back? But it takes time. It takes time for something that's called statism, this mentality that government is the final authority, to sink in, to force you into following orders, even if those orders involve your own demise.
Yeah. And one other thing, speaking of demise, in terms of the future of capitalism, what pros and cons do you see? What battles do you see it having to fight, and what advantages does it have?
Well, and capitalism as it is, I've never actually experienced it. I suppose the closest thing I've ever come is to dabbling with the black market, which some of us may have done and some of us may have not. But that really is what capitalism is today. Capitalism truly is the black market. It's the only time when government isn't involved in any kind of human interaction or exchange. And that's what it's been relegated to. The lifestyle that we're used to now is inspired by capitalism, I suppose, in some ways, but in general is corporatism. And the only thing I can guarantee you is more corporatism for the time being, especially after this State of the Union address that we saw, embarking on what we're going to be seeing over the next 4 years, which is even less freedom and more restrictions. So I see the economy slipping into worse shape, and the only thing I can say is I'm going to be there touting capitalism all the way and saying there is an alternative. And I suppose it's just going to take time, like I said, to watch this government falling on itself, because this is just unsustainable.
Yeah.
Just like everyone says it is.
I forget which one said this. I think it was Thomas Paine, but he said those who want freedom must defending them. I forget the name of the book. But yeah, undergo the tirelessness of defending it. So if people want to find out more about you and what you do, how can they do so?
Oh, just look for me at facebook.com/capitalists, CAPITALISTS. And you can also find me at capitalismisfreedom.com. And you can look for me on Facebook. You can friend me as Michael RinoRemover. And in case you're wondering what RINO stands for, it stands for Republican in name only. And mind you, I didn't even know I was a registered Republican until a while back. Actually, it wasn't until I went to go vote out John McCain during the 2008 elections. I was like, this guy has no chance of winning. I can't have him run. And then I found out that New York State is a closed primary place, and I found out that I was a registered independent. So apparently I was turned off to Republicans a long time ago, even though I came from a conservative family. And I still have issues with them to this day, and I'm very resentful of that the Republicans were able to find such a loser like Romney to run against one of the worst presidents that I know I've seen in my lifetime.
No, definitely. It was like sort of a setup. Find the worst
It was
candidate,
a setup. It was a setup. I'm gonna give you one more theory. I don't mean to make your podcast go too long, but I'll tell you this much. There was an RP that spoiled an election. His initials were RP. He was from Texas, and he was an election spoiler in 1992. I was a little kid in sleepaway camp when that happened, but I do remember my own parents voting for this man, and his name was Ross Perot. And he kept going on about the federal deficit. And George Bush Sr., who Reagan never liked, ever, he was going for his second term because he thought that he was, it was owed to him. And this guy came and in so many ways ruined it for him. And I'm telling you this right now. I really do believe that I think that both parties are in collusion with each other, and they just take turns. And since then, Bubba got in, he got 2 terms. Bush Jr. gets in. Such an unliked president. I couldn't believe it when he was reelected in 2004, but he was. And you know why? Because they found the worst candidate to run against him in 2004. Such an unappealing person like John Kerry. You remember how what that election came down to. It was, who were you more likely to have at a barbecue? And you know what? I'm not a big fan of George W., but I would gladly have him at a barbecue much sooner than John Kerry. He's going to crack jokes. I mean, he was at least entertaining for a puppet, even though he couldn't speak.
And he's easy to make fun of. He doesn't. The funny thing is, they said he's fluent in Spanish. I'm like, well, when's he going to become fluent in English?
Yeah, right. Isn't that the truth? But you know what it is? I doubt he really had the ambitions to become president. But in so many ways, the Bush family, Bush Jr. definitely a puppet. Bill Clinton definitely a puppet. Barack Obama absolutely a puppet. Reagan in so many ways, wanted to change things, but, he was shot pretty early in his term and had a lot of, discussions with men in dark suits. And before you know it, he had to become a puppet as well. But the guy who really did pull the strings, the one president that we had that really was fully in charge and still is in some ways to this day, although I'm sure he's relinquishing it due to his health, is Bush Sr. He's a bad guy. He's CIA. And like I said, we can go down that rabbit hole, maybe for another podcast.
All right. Well, thanks for having on, and we'd like to have you back on in the future.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
All right.